Hi, it's Katrina. Number 10. The Vampire of Preparacon. At the archaeological site of Preparacon in Bulgaria, the grave of a young man who may or may not have been a vampire was just uncovered. The young man was found buried with an iron knife stuck through his heart and his left leg cut into 3 pieces and placed neatly beside him. Head of excavations, Professor Nikolai Ovcharov, says he believes this young man was mutilated after death as part of an anti-vampire ritual. The townsfolk were trying to save themselves from a potential blood-sucking vampire rising from the grave. As for why they may have thought this guy was a vampire, the professor went on to say that he probably experienced an unnatural cause of death. This could mean anything from a mysterious disease to dying under dubious circumstances. Whatever the case, an iron knife through the heart and the dismemberment of one leg seemed to do the trick. And believe it or not, the vampire wasn't the only bizarre grave found here. Another was found with a woman and child positioned like the Virgin Mary and the baby Jesus. And yet again, the professor says this fairly common type of burial was a medieval practice to protect the townsfolk from something they didn't understand. Normally, it was the plague. Number 9. Ancient burial mounds. Back in 1865, the Big Barrel Mound was excavated in East Kazakhstan. Archaeologists discovered the burial plot of a noble, buried with 17 horses. Everything was found in almost perfect condition because of the permafrost that kept all the dead bodies frozen. Then, in 1999, archaeologists revisited the site and uncovered a new burial mound, in which they discovered the body of a man, a woman, and 13 horses. This new burial proved exciting because archaeologists also found gold ornaments depicting strange mythical creatures. They found things that look kind of like elk, totally indiscernible animals, and things that may or may not have been griffins. This entire area is covered in graves. The ancient steppe people who lived here in the Altai region thousands of years ago were some of the first to bury their dead. Archaeologists even found cenotaph graves in which a person had a burial without their body. If someone died or went missing, a symbolic burial was created in which a horse would be killed and buried along with an empty stone coffin. As for who the people were, researchers believe they may have been associated with the Yuezhi people. They were probably wiped out in the 3rd century AD when the Huns rolled through the area and killed pretty much everyone. Number 8. Mysterious elk bones. The bizarre discovery of ancient elk bones has been puzzling archaeologists since 1999. When a series of bones were excavated from the Lundby Bog in Denmark, archaeologists later dated the mysterious elk bones back to sometime around 9400 BC. Give or take a century, that's about 11,000 years before today. But this was based on science from 20 years ago. Specialists recently went back to take a new look at the bones and were able to date them back even further to 9873 BC. What this means is that the elk bones weren't buried in the bog over a short period. They weren't part of a single mass sacrifice or anything. Instead, they had been placed in the bog over several centuries. What makes this so mysterious is that, according to Christopher Buck Pedersen with the Museum of Southeast Denmark, there have been no settlements found that are that old in the region. People were clearly living here and continuously placing bones in the bog, yet there is no trace of any habitations from the period associated with the discovered bones. We don't know who put the bones in the bog or why, yet there are several of them, at least 6 deposits just bursting with elk bones. It almost certainly had something to do with a prehistoric ritual, but it's impossible to paint a clear picture of the site and its purpose without more evidence. The best guess scientists have now is that the Magalmosian culture was behind the elk bones. This is because archaeologists discovered an axe made from elk antler, something we know was used by the Magalmosians between the years 9000 and 6000 BC. Number 7. Grave of the Giant Warlord. Archaeologists have discovered the grave of a giant warlord horseman from the 11th century. He was found inside an extremely elaborate grave, decorated in a death mask, adorned with the fang of a bear, and buried with heaps of arrows. All these trinkets were supposedly indications of just how strong and powerful the warlord was. Scientists say he towered over other people of the day, at least a foot taller than the average Siberian native at the time. He stood approximately at 5'11". That's actually taller than the current average for American men, meaning that by the standards of the time, this man was a giant. This man has been named Bogatyr by the Russian researchers. It translates roughly to Great Warrior. But even though this man was huge and most definitely a fearsome warrior in what is today Western Siberia, there is still a great deal that archaeologists can't figure out about him. For example, his death mask was found laced with metal fish figurines. Archaeologists and other researchers are unsure about what they mean, but suggest they could have had religious significance. There was also a decorated bronze mirror placed on his chest that the experts are a bit confused by. They think it may have been a tool designed for the dead man to communicate with the gods once he was buried. And then, of course, there was the small hoard of arrows that he was supposed to use for any necessary hunting in the afterlife. Bogatyr was probably around 40 years old when he died. The cause of death isn't certain, but it may have had something to do with the fact that his left arm was severed and buried beside his broken shoulder. He almost definitely died in battle. Number 6. Stone Age rituals. In Sweden, on the uninhabited island of Bla Jungfrun, an ancient ritual center has been discovered in a series of caves. The ritualistic activities that went on here date back up to 9,000 years ago. Even today, the island has a deep association with witchcraft, curses, and supernatural forces. The archaeologists behind the discovery say that there was extensive human activity on the island during the Stone Age. They found a fireplace underneath a huge hole that had been hammered into the wall of one of the caves. This could have been a stage that was partially covered. That way spectators could stand at the top and peer down the cavern entrance, seeing the flames and hearing the great hammering at the wall. And here's where things get really spooky. Researchers at the site discovered an altar where offerings may have been made to unknown deities. But because this was 9,000 years ago, whatever details of the types of ceremonies and rituals that were enacted in this ancient site that reeks of magic is still a total mystery. Ancient seal bones have been discovered underneath the rock, quartz has been found for making tools, but not much else. No human remains have been discovered to suggest sacrifice. All we know is that something creepy was going on here, and all these years later, not a single soul lives on the island. Perhaps there is a reason for people to shy away from the area. Number 5. An Aztec Dog Skull. Excavations at a subway extension in Mexico City turned up one of the more unusual Aztec offerings ever found. Archaeologists found the skull of a dog with holes in it. The holes indicate that it was at one time displayed on a ritual skull rack called sompantli. These racks are exactly what you're picturing in your mind. Imagine a rack for hats or coats, except it's filled with human skulls. This type of decor was normally reserved for the victims of human sacrifices, but the presence of the dog skull shows that our canine friends may have also been the unfortunate victims of having their heads mounted. At the same time, excavators found the skull of a woman and the skulls from 2 men with similar perforations. These skulls were probably also mounted on a public display rack. But it's really the dog that has the attention of archaeologists because something like it has just never been found before. The skull dates back to somewhere between 1350 and 1521. This was the prime killing season for the Aztecs. When they captured warriors from rival groups, they almost always sacrificed a few of them as offerings to their gods. And when victims were offered up as food for the gods, their heads went on racks. Archaeologist Maria de Jesus Sanchez says horse skulls have been found on racks before, but definitely never dogs. And now for number 4. But first, I want to give a big shout out to Ashley's Interest and JM. Thanks so much for supporting Origins Explained. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe for more scary archaeological discoveries. Number 4. Semidigested food. What I'm about to tell you is kind of disgusting, so you better prepare yourself. New research has proven that our Neanderthal ancestors feasted on the semi-digested food that they discovered inside the stomachs of animals they hunted. As gross as that might sound, the stomach contents of animals are in fact totally edible. You could go hunt a deer right now and eat whatever it hasn't digested at the time of its death. Neanderthals figured this out and used it to their advantage to get as much food and nutrition from their kills as they possibly could. The discovery came in part by analyzing the plaque found on Neanderthal teeth. Researchers found a bizarre substance known as chyme. The only way to get chyme is to take it from the stomach of a dead animal. Partially digested food mixed with stomach acid creates a disgusting green goop called chyme. Since it was found on Neanderthal teeth, they were very clearly consuming the undigested food of their prey, leading to the green goop being found in abundance. But this gross discovery was actually part of a larger study on the Neanderthal diet. Researchers found that our ancestors ate pretty much anything they could. Some Neanderthals even feasted on chamomile herbs, which taste terrible and have absolutely no nutritional value. Some researchers believe they ate chamomile to self-medicate. Maybe they made tea. Then again, maybe not. Neanderthals may not have been that smart. They may have actually been eating half-digested chamomile by accident while slurping from animal guts. Would you ever eat half-digested food from an animal's stomach to survive? Let me know in the comments below. Number 3. Maya altars and snake kings. In the jungles of northern Guatemala, archaeologists have discovered a carved stone altar in the ancient city of La Corona. The altar dates back 1,500 years to the days of the Maya and is the oldest relic of its kind at La Corona site. It comes from the classic Maya period, between 250 and 900 AD. Researchers with the National Museum of Archaeology and Ethnology in Guatemala City did an analysis of carvings on the altar. They seem to show the origin of the Canul dynasty, which went on to rule the Maya lowlands for about 200 years. The altar shows a previously unknown king named Chak Tuk Ichak. In the carving, he's seen carrying a double-headed serpent, which makes perfect sense. After all, the rulers of the Canul dynasty were known as the Snake Kings. The Snake Kings were feared throughout all of the Maya world. In the year 562, the capital of the Maya Empire, Tikal, fell under the forces of the Canul dynasty. But even though we have found traces of these powerful and mysterious people throughout most of the old Maya world, we still know very little about them. They were likely an ambitious force in the south that decided to push up and take over the entire empire, succeeding in some places, and then ultimately vanishing by the year 900. Number 2. Ritual violence. In 2012, the country of Denmark revealed archaeological excavations where experts found the bones of an entire army. This army had befallen some of the worst ritualistic violence imaginable some 2,000 years ago. Many of the warriors who fell during this major battle fought near the modern Danish town of Skanderborg, and they had been absolutely mutilated. For example, one of the finds was a wooden stick shoved through the pelvic bones of 4 different fallen warriors. Archaeologists also found hundreds of crushed skulls, bones with evidence that they had been cut or bashed, and other gruesome finds. According to the researchers from Aarhus University, all of this brutality occurred about 6 months after the fallen warriors had already been lying dead on the battlefield. Here is what likely happened. Dead people were gathered together, the flesh was cleaned from their bones, and then they were brutally desecrated before being moved to the nearby lake and disposed of. It was probably some kind of religious act, but archaeologists are stumped about what the precise purpose could have been. Today, it honestly just seems like violence for the sake of violence. Number 1. Killer Cave of Hades. There is a giant cave in Greece that experts say may have been the inspiration for the Greek underworld known as Hades. This cave had also once been the home of hundreds of people, before it collapsed and killed everyone inside. The cave was first discovered in 1958. It's positively gigantic, nearly 3,300 feet long, and so big that it has its own lake. Archaeologists have found copper artifacts, pieces of pottery, and tools that date back to the Stone Age, 9,000 years ago. Cave dwellers used it as a shelter and also as a cemetery, but all that came to an end 5,000 years ago when it collapsed and buried everyone alive. But just because the cave collapsed didn't mean the locals forgot about it. Researchers believe the cave continued to be used as a burial place and as a location for mysterious rituals. Entering into the collapsed cave would have felt like going into the underworld. It even had its own creepy underground river that may have been the inspiration for the river Styx. It's impossible to say for sure if the cave really was where the Greeks came up with their version of the underworld. But looking at its complex history and the Greek fascination with a subterranean land of the dead, it's definitely the #1 suspect for a real-life Hades. Would you dare enter the deadly cave of the god of the underworld? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you soon for more terrifying and fascinating archaeological discoveries. Bye!